Hi, thanks for coming to listen to the next chapter of Spring According to Humphrey. We are on chapter 10 Spectacular Signs of Spring. Spring almost ruined my week at Cassie's house. Don't get me wrong, she took excellent care of me. She even took me out of my cage, which I enjoy, especially when my friends make mazes for me to run. But Cassie was also worried about finding signs of spring. And as the week went on, she got more and more worried. Do some deep breathing, her mom said, when Cassie moaned that she couldn't find one new thing to add to her list. I'm busy, Cammy said when Cassie begged her to help. Cassie's dad took her to the park one day. They were gone for hours, but when she came back, she was almost in tears. Sure, the grass is starting to turn green and the trees have buds on them, but they're already on the list. Mrs. Brisbane will be so upset if I can't find something, she said. I thought Mrs. Brisbane was your favorite teacher ever, her dad said. She'll understand. But Cassie was still upset. The next day, Cassie's mom took her for a long walk around the neighborhood. I crossed my toes and hoped that the exercise would calm her down. I spent the day in my cage, napping, spinning on my wheel, and staring out the window. I missed Og. I missed my classmates. I even missed the Specks. That afternoon, while I was thinking about them and looking out the window, I noticed something new. A small brown bird lit on a tree branch and then hopped a few inches just out of my view. I climbed to the top of my cage. I could see it. The bird hopped farther until I couldn't see it again. So I scurried over to the corner and stretched my neck. The bird was standing on the edge of a nest. A smaller brown bird was inside the nest. My neck was getting tired, but I kept staring at the nest. It was woven out of twigs, bits of mud, fluff, paper, and straw. It was a wonderful sight. And birds' nests are definitely signs of spring. I couldn't wait for Cassie to come back from her walk so she could see it too. When she returned, she looked very discouraged as she slumped down on her bed. Nothing new, she said. The signs of spring have stopped. I raced to the front of my cage and squeaked, No, 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 no. There is a bird's nest right outside the window. Look. I tried to point, but since Cassie wasn't looking at me, it didn't matter. She sighed. I'll be the only one in room 26 without a new sign of spring. Look outside at the very edge of the window, I squeaked at the top of my lungs. Cassie didn't notice. As wonderful as they are, humans can be very frustrating at times. In fact, I was so frustrated that I jumped up and down. Please look. Cassie glanced over at me and smiled. Oh, Humphrey, you're so cute. Cute? I don't care about being cute. Okay, maybe just a little bit. To squeak the truth, I was a little bit upset with Cassie until I realized that from where she was sitting, she couldn't see the tree branch. The curtain was blocking her view. Pull back the curtain, I squeaked. It's right outside the window. Cassie just sighed. Of course, once it was dark outside, there was no chance of Cassie seeing the nest. She left the room to have dinner and watch the television with her family. As she did, I began to think. Squeaking at Cassie wasn't helping at all. Since she couldn't understand me, I needed to show her the nest. But how? Later, Cassie came back to her room for bedtime. She read for a while before her dad turned off the light. I hope you're not too disappointed in me, Humphrey, Cassie said. Then her breathing changed and I could tell that she was asleep. Her mom had closed the curtain completely when she said goodnight to Cassie, but there was a little opening that let in some moonlight. I stared at the moonlight a long time before I came up with a plan. I waited until the house was completely quiet. Then I carefully jiggled the lock that doesn't lock on my cage and tiptoed out onto the table. There was only about an inch of space between the table and the windowsill. I held my breath and leaped. Whew! I was positively relieved to land safely. I stopped to catch my breath. Then I began to push the curtain away from the window. I had no idea that a curtain could be so heavy. I pushed with all my might, and nothing happened. Oh, I took a deep breath, pushed again, and the curtain slowly began to move. The great thing about those curtains was that when I pushed the left curtain, the right curtain also moved. With a few deep breaths and a few rest stops, I managed to push the curtain as far as it would go. Once I caught my breath, I stopped to look at the moon, and then I looked down. The silvery light was shining on the nest tucked in the branches of the tree. It was closer now and could see much better. Oh, I was closer now and could see much better. I stared for a while because it was so round and cozy, almost as cozy as my little sleeping hut. I crossed my toes and hoped that in the morning Cassie would see the nest too. By the time I returned to my cage and closed the door behind me, I was feeling unsqueakably tired. I sank down into my bedding and stared up at the moon until suddenly it was morning. I'd slept through most of the night, which is quite a feat for a hamster. Good morning, Humphrey, Cassie said as she looked into my cage. Don't look at me, look out the window. There's a spectacular sign of spring, I squeaked excitedly. Cassie just yawned. Ready for breakfast? Her dad asked as he poked his head in the doorway. I made pancakes and sausage and biscuits, scrambled eggs and pizza. Really? Cassie flapped her hands excitedly. Her dad laughed. April Fools, he said. Didn't you look at the calendar? It's April 1st, April Fool's Day. Cassie laughed and then turned serious. What are we really having for breakfast? The good news is we are having pancakes, he said with a smile. Yay! Cassie raced out of the room. Why would Cassie's dad fib about all the things he made for breakfast? Because it was April Fool's Day. Why is there a day to celebrate being foolish? I will never figure out humans. I sighed. The cozy nest was now in plain sight, only Cassie wasn't there to see it. I thought of making a sign saying bird's nest with a big arrow pointing at the window, but if I did that, Cassie would know that I can read and write and get out of my cage. Those are things I like to keep secret. Cassie and her mom came back in a little while. I'll make the bed if you pick up your clothes, her mom said, and they got to work. Please, look out the window, I squeaked. Why is Humphrey squeaking like that? Cassie's mom asked. Cassie giggled. He's talking. Yes, I squeaked at the top of my small lungs. I'm trying to tell you to look out the window. Cassie and her mom just laughed. After they straightened up the room, Cassie's mom said, Wow, it's really bright this morning. I crossed my toes and hoped. Cassie's mom walked across the room to the window. I'll just close these a little. No, 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 I screamed. My heart sank as she started to pull the curtains together after I'd worked so hard to open them. And then she stopped. Cassie, come here, she said. Look at that branch. She pointed and Cassie looked. I don't see anything except leaves, she said. I held my breath. Look again, her mom said. Cassie gasped and clapped her hands. It's a nest, I shouted as she danced around the circle. Oh, Mom, it's a nest. Oh, she shouted. Calm down, Cassie, her mom said. You'll scare the birds away. Cassie took a deep breath. I could tell she was trying to stay calm. I can't believe it, Cassie whispered. We're so close. I think you found your sign of spring, her mom said as she hurried out of the room. I'm going to get your dad and Cammy. I could breathe again. My plan had worked. For the rest of my time at Cassie's house, the whole family came to watch the birds. The female must be sitting on some eggs. Watch how the male bird brings her food, Dad said. Cammy gave Cassie tips on how to get the best photos. Cassie's dad printed the photos out for her, and Cassie's mom found a book in the library about how birds build nests. Look, there's my pink shoelace. Cassie pointed to the nest, and Cammy took a picture. Cassie took notes, made drawings, and even made a video of the male bringing food for the female. Once in a while, she left the nest to get food, and the male stayed behind. They're so wonderful. How can we help them? Cassie asked her mother. Cassie's mom had an idea. She took Cassie to the store to buy bird seed and a feeder so it would be easier for the birds to have food. Cassie took more pictures of the birds taking turns going to the feeder. The birds worked hard together and helped each other, just like Cassie's family. I had a little pang as I thought about how wonderful families really were. I wished I had one too. On Sunday, my last day at Cassie's, some very surprising things happened. First of all, Cassie and Cammy took baskets and ran through the backyard picking up brightly colored eggs. They said the Easter bunny had left them. But why an Easter bunny? Why not an Easter hamster? They also ate a good amount of chocolate, which they didn't share. That's a good thing because candy isn't healthy for hamsters to eat. The other surprising thing that happened on Sunday was that the small brown bird flew off while the father bird stood guard on the edge of the nest. That's when we saw them. Three small eggs on the edge. That's when we saw them. Three small speckled eggs. Cassie managed to take a photo just before the mother bird returned to the nest. I never thought the sight of three eggs could be so wonderful. Even more exciting than the eggs left by the Easter Bunny. I can't wait for school tomorrow, Cassie told me that night. I'll have the best signs of spring in room 26. I think you're right, I squeaked. When class began on Monday morning, Cassie ran up to Mrs. Brisbane and asked, "Are we going to share our signs of spring this morning?" "Yes," Mrs. Brisbane said. "Did you find some?" Cassie nodded. "I found something wonderful." Our teacher smiled and told Cassie to take her seat. Tell the truth, Thomas entered with a shocked look on his face. "It's starting to snow," he said. Mrs. Brisbane looked surprised. I looked out the window and saw that it was a beautiful, sunny spring day. Suddenly, Thomas grinned. "April Fools!" Mrs. Brisbane smiled and said, "This isn't April 1st, Thomas." "I know," Thomas said, "but we were on break for April Fool's Day, so I had to do it today." Just before the bell rang, Joey arrived carrying the aquarium. It was covered with a cloth, so I couldn't see inside. He walked very slowly and set it down so carefully. "Wait till you see, Og," Joey whispered. Boing, 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 Og jumped up and down on a rock. Rosie rolled her wheelchair toward the aquarium. "Let's see." "Not now," Mrs. Brisbane said. "Joey will uncover it when we talk about our signs of spring. Right, Joey?" Joey smiled and nodded. He looked like he had a big, happy secret. Normally, I wouldn't change a thing Mrs. Brisbane does, but that morning I wished she wouldn't make us study our vocabulary words first thing in the morning. How could I think about words like wander, observe, and drift when I observed that my mind was wandering and drifting to thoughts about that covered aquarium? I think many of my friends had the same problem because they kept sneaking glances at our table by the window. At last, it was time for recess, and my friends all hurried out to the playground, leaving me staring at a piece of cloth. I concentrated on looking out the window instead. I noticed the first drops of rain beginning to fall. "I guess our students will be back soon," Mrs. Brisbane said out loud. Suddenly, a few drops of rain turned to millions of drops of rain. My classmates returned to room 26 quickly, and they were dripping wet. Mrs. Brisbane gave them paper towels to dry their arms and faces. "We still have a few minutes of recess," she said. "What would you like to do?" "Oh, see what's in the aquarium." "Tell the truth," Thomas shouted. Everyone else loudly agreed, including me. Even Og said, "Boing, boing." Mrs. Brisbane took our chalk and stood by our signs of spring list on the board. "What did you find over spring break?" she asked. Holly held up a beautiful photo of a tree with white flowers. "It's a dogwood," she said, which was strange because it didn't look anything like a dog. My friends had seen pink trees and red birds and black birds. Tall Paul held up a large drawing of a nose. "What's that?" Mrs. Brisbane asked. "I have allergies in the spring. They make my nose run." Everybody laughed, but I didn't understand. "Your nose is attached to your face. How could it run? And where does it go?" "Allergies are very unpleasant signs of spring," Mrs. Brisbane agreed. "Calm down, Cassie," waved her arm until I thought it would fall off. Mrs. Brisbane finally called on her. "Two birds built a nest right outside my bedroom, and there are eggs." She held up a page of photos. "I have a video, too. It was the most wonderful thing I've ever seen." "I saw it, too," I squeaked. Small Paul shared his temperature chart that showed that it was continuing to get warmer and warmer. "What about the tadpoles?" Rosie asked. "I just can't wait." Mrs. Brisbane waited until the end to call on Joey. "I guess it's time," Mrs. Brisbane said. It was time, all right, though I was a tiny bit worried about what I'd see in that tank. All right, tune in for chapter 11. Uncle Og.